Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Diamond Night Studios interview series. Here we have another composer in the studio, Joe Jackson, the one, the only, from Jersey.
No.
Oh, okay. We're wrong. Okay,
How do we start this interview?
okay. Yeah, we're already getting off on a good start here. Okay, so he's not from Jersey. Okay, he's currently in Austin, Texas. Been composing, for the past 5 years, I presume, in his master's program here at UT Austin, and it's got a lot of things going for him. He's a film composer. He's also doing concert works. Has a bunch of things coming up that hopefully we'll talk about later on in the interview. But yeah, so we have Joe into the studio. How's it going, Joe?
What's up, Cambry? I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Things are starting to cool down a little bit in the school year, so I feel like I'm able to relax a bit more and get more mentally prepared to finish out the semester strong.
Yeah, I feel that. I'm just like 2 more weeks. We got this. We're gonna finish up, and
2 weeks, man.
yeah,
It baffles me how it works over here. I know they pushed the semester back, which also took out a whole week of our winter break, but
yeah,
but if it means getting out before May, I
hmm
ain't got I ain't complaining.
yeah, yeah. I was actually excited about that too. So in a more summertime, but yeah. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Joe. Let's get to
Yeah.
know Joe. Let's get to know his story. Starting out with where you're from, where you're from. Maybe you can help me out in that regard. Where you're from, your
Maybe,
background,
maybe,
your
maybe.
back, your background in music, what got you into music, all things
Hmm.
music.
Yeah,
what's your story?
sure, man. So I was born in Manhattan, New York, but I was essentially raised in Virginia since the age of 2. So I'm really from Virginia, though having been born in New York. But my parents have been they've been huge musical influences, though they weren't necessarily musicians themselves. Like my mother, she played clarinet in high school and well, didn't really like it. So that's as far as that went. And for my father, we always called him a jazz enthusiast, where I don't think he's actually played an instrument, but he has tons and tons of tracks of smooth jazz, R&B, soul, hip hop, you name it, from artists such as Foreplay to the Black Eyed Peas to Regina Carter. It's a whole it's a lot of variety that I mean he would constantly play those in the house through and of course as technology started getting better with Bluetooth speakers and stuff, he also was he is a tech savvy kind of pop person as well. And so the house will always be filled with with those tracks, those songs that were just filling, they were just going into my head and adding to my already apparently established fascination of music. Because I was told when I was like a very young toddler, when we had cable, when there would be those channels at the very end that were pretty much like the precursors to streaming services. They would only be playing music and tracks. So I would, my family would tell me that whenever they had one of those channels on, my young self would just go straight to the TV, sit down, and just take it in. Like I would just be so fascinated by the sounds. That's obviously just not a lot happening visually, but yet there's so much happening, orally that that's well has apparently stuck with me since. And so with my mother, she has been the main influence for the classical side. She had tons of CDs, well, really a handful of Mozart and Beethoven primarily, since that's what most people know when you ask what they know of classical music. It's usually those two composers, which have had their strong influence on me in terms of the the relationship between instruments, the counterpoint and all that fun stuff. And she also was hugely into Christian gospel and also rap as well. A little bit of a little bit of I mean, maybe like trap rap. It's a very specific niche genre, and there's those two that again it would all just be filling the house constantly. And so I would be drunk, like catching all these nuances. Of course, I would have no terminology, but I would over time getting used to these songs. I would get used to the patterns. I would notice patterns, and so that continued on to when I started band in middle school. I started out on the alto saxophone, played that for 3 years, and then switched to trombone in 8th grade. And then I switched to horn, which is now my primary sophomore going to sophomore year of high school and continue that throughout undergrad. And so band music has been, of course, a big influence in terms of the primarily music education here in Virginia. And so my first pieces were, believe it or not, band pieces. I
Yeah.
wrote them like between sophomore and junior year of high school, where it was like, I think because what I would do when I get fascinated with band pieces back in middle school, after I got introduced to notation software, I would just find band pieces I liked, like on JW Pepper and publishing companies, and I would just transcribe them note for note and like what was finale at the time. Like, I had finale 2011, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it'll just be, and so by typing in all those, those young, almost beginner band scores, you start to really pick up on what melodies looks like, what you see, what counter melody looks like. You see harmonies and modulations. Of course, again, the terminology was not there, but I was catching the patterns, I was catching the nuances. I was like, oh, this is what this is doing, and this comes up again later, and now it comes up again in other pieces by this composer, and so I'm just building a huge cache of musical knowledge. And again, I know the key word here for this interview is nuances. I just keep going back to that word, but this is what it is. We don't have the terminology for it. And so I'm now, after writing my first band pieces, I went to James Madison University for my undergrad. Go Dukes! And so I did that, for my whole 4 years as a composition major. My primary instrument was French horn. Still played a little bit of trombone for the jazz band for my final semester. I actually had the time to carve out jazz band for it, because jazz has been a huge part of my upbringing to music as a whole, believe it or not. And so now here I am in my master's, and I want to start tapping into that a bit more. Now that I've gotten a good understanding of, well, in terms of education, has been primarily stuff with the Western canon, with bits and pieces starting to spread out into things outside that canon, and things that are not just Western, things of other cultures, other places that that view music very differently, or how we perceive music and sound. And so now I want to start tapping into really just my heritage a little bit now, and start trying to understand and write more music that has been primarily been pioneered by Black artists.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you say that, because considering your work that you actually just had performed at one of our readings, it was just like a what's the word, like a jambalaya of different things, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this is actually really interesting, because like as a composer who's just like very like not rigid, but very like decisive, very like directional. Like, I thought it was really cool to be able to see how all these influences are coming together, and it's not just in that specific works, but it's in all your works. In Persevering, a piece that we has had performed. I believe this was the second time recently by Lab Orchestra. There's another recording on his website, by the way. You should check it out, joejacksonmusic.com. You can find some of his works there. But yeah. So you can see like the combination of all these different elements going into your work, which I find very, very interesting. And that kind of like rolled into film music too, which I was also cool, because it helped with Valiant, as we'll get to later. So how was that transition for you, going from band world to film music? Because you do a little bit of it all. You do orchestra, you do band, you do all of it. So how was that transition for you?
Of course. So as with our generation, like our main, one of the biggest sources of entertainment for us were the movies, and of course a lot of family friendly, or at least movies for the entire family. Companies like Disney, Pixar, and even what was it? I can't remember if it's Blue Sky, Blue Light, the ones that did the Ice Age franchise and stuff. Like we grew up with those as well, and so, and of course there are those tracks that with films that are tiered towards younger audiences, the scores are actually a little bit more involved than your typical modern thriller, because it helped keep, not I won't say it keeps kids' attention, but it definitely draws their attention more with a score that's more active, that's more not chatty, but just it interacts more with different parts and with different characters and different scenes, and even within the orchestra or whatever ensemble that's being used for the film itself. It's I think it's one of the things that started building to the back of my head, and I started taking notice of it later and later. I think the first soundtrack I ever listened to by itself without film was How to Train Your Dragon, the first one by John Powell. I remember watching the movie, loved the film, and of course, a good film has good music. It's because I mean, like, you strip out the music, it's really hard to watch it, right? It can be a little hard nowadays to watch them with a lot of silence when you feel like there should be something to help support the emotion. And so listening to that soundtrack by myself, and this was definitely like early high school. And so hearing that and just hearing all the stuff that you wouldn't hear with the dialogue, because again, as we know, it gets heavily mixed down to not overpower the sound effects and the dialogue. So there's a lot of things we don't get to hear as well, and a lot of interweaving parts that happen. And so hearing that score, I was again, it started adding to my fascination of music and my and I started doing that for other movies. And one that will always take to my heart is Treasure Planet. It was an underrated 2001 Disney film that scored by James Newton Howard. I recently found like a YouTube video of a guy that played both French horn and trumpet quite well. Did like a cover of one of the biggest cues from that movie, Jim Saves the Crew, and he actually had like, a little bit of a score by play of his like horn part range. So it wasn't just playing what the brass were playing. He also edited the parts a little bit to even include some, you know, some string and woodwind parts to make it a little bit more on the virtuosic side, not necessarily like a solo, but to get the parts more, more dexterity, what you wouldn't expect a brass players to do. And so seeing that and hearing that score again after having seen that movie in years, it shifted my whole being a little bit. Like I think I cried a little bit because it's one of those that it tears at music. It's the music that tears at your heartstrings, that helps evoke emotion, that hopefully helps you feel much better after having heard it, right? In most cases, and that is what I don't want to say it's what I want to do, but I really would like to do it. And seeing, of course, doing more research as to how it can be a very profitable market. Of course, the work to get in there, it's a lot of work, which I'm all for. I do consider myself very hardworking, and especially for the projects that I will mention soon. But because I put in the work for it. Like some say I have talent, and that is probably true. But it's what you do with the talent. Like you can't just sit with it and expect to get all this stuff. No, you have to continue refining it. You have to continue discovering yourself and saying like, okay, how far can you take this? What more can we do? And what more can I do? You do. And so going back to this thing with film, so it's things like hearing the soundtracks by himself and hearing like, of course, lovely orchestrations. Because I think a track specifically from my father's side that I think was like one of the smallest things that's inspired like combining those smooth jazz era music with orchestra was Barry White, and his theme was Love's theme. And of course he's done similar tracks, but it's that one where like I hear all these. It opens with swirling string lines, and then it goes up to that that high arrival point that you hear in a lot of disco eras, that high string sustain that's just in the back, and it's just that stuff that just again it does really well at evoking emotion. It paints a story. It tells a mood, and that's what I would really like to do with my music. And well, I feel like I've already have been touching that, chipping that iceberg a little bit with recent pieces. Now that I'm getting more acquainted with ensembles and my own writing style, and so going back to film, so that's what really would help inspire like me, like what I think I want to try and do film. Seeing like there's considering my love for orchestra, and of course not just orchestra, but other hybrids, combined with synthesizers, electronic sounds, and of course even doing not just orchestra, like even and combining world instruments and other musicians. Like it's so has so much variety that I feel like I want to do, because I don't want to be stuck doing one thing. As much as I love orchestra, I don't want to be only doing orchestra, because I feel like that can get really tiring, especially with the amount of options that we have nowadays. There's so many music options that all are considered music and wonderful pieces of art and expression in their own respective ways. And so I want to try my and be eclectic and try to understand and learn as much as I can of the different ways of music making. And so that's why like, I have a strong, affinity for the film scene, and I'm slowly building. I mean, I've been grateful enough to have to find some mentors and to help me and make sure I'm thinking about something's the right way and I'm approaching things from an accessible way. But also coming here to UT, working with the faculty, Sam Littman, as UT doesn't have a straight up film scoring program, and I've looked and I've applied to them, but I still felt UT was the best spot for me because I'm able to because compositionally I feel very confident with writing for for picture or just to give a narrative storytelling experience. But what I need to get in touch with is technology. No, I'm no boomer. I know technology pretty well, but it's working with DAWs and understanding plugins and MIDI processing. It's those intricate things that I haven't been able to get as much experience with when studying at my bachelor's. And so I felt like coming here and learning at a more comfortable pace with Sam, being helped as of me being able to catch up instead of feeling like I have all this pressure down, being at an ad program with experts and those that have been probably doing this since their young age, and so where it's like I would feel a lot more pressure and and may not have succeeded as much as I'd like to, or I've progressed as much as I'd like to. So that's where and of course even my concert works, you hear a little bit of cinematic influences and nuances, that trigger word again, that of course having watched movies in Cambria would understand this too. And I think even brought up about it with one of the readings of my piece prologue for string orchestra, for our string orchestra reading. It's you see those influences start to pull in, and I love it. Like, and of course, I'm very careful to see like how obvious I want to make it. Even if I want to, if it's conscious in my head, like, oh, I want to make a cinematic, influence here, and it's like how much do I do it? And will that help or hurt the piece? But I think I am getting a little bit off track. But that's just to say, I love film, even though I'm focusing a little bit on concert music for now because things are picking up faster than I expected. There's nothing to say that the film's not going to be at the forefront. Well, it is kind of on the background because I mean it's one of the things like you see John Williams and everyone knows John Williams. You see all the big orchestras, the big budget orchestras start doing like dedicated concert series, just his films. Like it's insane. And so it's like, well, and going back to his story, like he didn't get his big break until like the 40s. Like he's had gigs and like he was a jazz pianist and he would be constantly hired for those scoring sessions until he, stepped in on a particular project as an orchestrator. And of course, that's one of the many like balls that got him rolling. So like, and he was already well into his life when he started. So it's one of the things where like I feel comfortable with where I am right now because like I don't have to feel like I have to rush so fast. Like as I know, like my time will come.
Yeah, and I think it's cool you mentioned just as a brief side note, the scores of Treasure Planet, because I grew up with that film. I also grew up with another one, Atlantis, the Long Lost Empire, also scored by I call him J and H, but James Newton Howard, the one, the only, but yeah, those scores are very intricate in detail. And as a composer who likes to focus on the big picture, it can be very difficult to get an articulate like vision like that. And that being said, I could see that influence. So as most of you already know, he was the orchestrator on Valiant, the new piece that we both wrote together. And it was a really astounding process because as collaborators, as composers, we're taught to do basically everything. And so and we get used to doing everything, which writing, orchestrating, doing parts, in this case recording, doing mock-ups specifically for a film. But now when you're working with somebody, it's like we're delegating these. So it's like, especially as a composer who's used to being hands-on, having somebody else take your work and expand it was a little difficult for me. And Joe can tell you there were moments where it was kind of hard for me to like just let him do his work. You know, I'd be like texting him and be like, "Hey man, I'm gonna do this." He's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Oh well, you know, you're right. I'm gonna let you do it. I'm gonna let you do your work." But yeah, so all that uh, to say that those influences, the treasure planet, James Newton Howard influences, I think, came through your articulate vision for the piece Valiant, which you orchestrated. And so, how was that process for you? Because honestly, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know much about your process for doing. You just kind of gave me the orchestrated score. And I was like, okay, let's go, let's get it recorded. And so what was your process for doing that, or what were your influences? How did that work for you?
Yeah. So like with an orchestrator, as the role of an orchestrator, I am not necessarily, of course, as the title suggests, I'm not a composer, although I collaborated with you on this project, but as an orchestrator, I take, the main composer's ideas and or so-called chicken scratches. And and that's how it worked in the film industry, where, the timelines and deadlines would be so compact that the composer doesn't have a, enough time by themselves to get the ideas and then get them fully laid out to get to prep them for recording. And so that's what they hire orchestrators to do, like take the chicken scratches and then lay them all out for the orchestra and get them ready for to get get preparing the score and parts, getting ready for the recording session. And while the composer continues to write out what needs to happen, stylistically, compositionally, what needs to happen to get the right effect, the right emotion, the right support for the visual. And so for my process, I mean, what I got from Canby were indeed chicken scratches that, of course, this is my first time doing this type of orchestrated work. So of course, then thankfully Canby was very and benevolent and amiable with the back and forth with clarifying what he means by this, because there's things was I was like I just wanted to see some clarification, like what were you thinking of for here, because I mean the more clarification, the more that I feel confident with how I think you'll hopefully appreciate the decisions that you used to make, because I want to make sure it fits with what you want. And as long as as long as I can get what you want to work well with the musicians we have available, to get the same amount of energy, same amount of impact, or even intimacy that that we need. So it was pretty much like Camry would just write, here I want like either horn or cello melody, surprised me. And there were also times like, oh, I want double basses to do this rhythm, or any low winds in general to do this. And I would take those statements and I would experiment. Sometimes I would just lay them out and then experiment with different combinations. Sorry, what would feel good at this point in the piece? Like say, are we in exposition? Should we have this many people playing at once right now, or is there a way I can do the same effect with less? That would definitely that would pay off more towards the latter half with the bigger climactic moments at the end of it. And so it's just those questions like that I ask myself at the dead of night when I'm working to write, get them ready for my own deadlines with Cambry to get these done. And so it's been a really fun process nonetheless, because I at this point I'm really starting to get a comfortable grasp with writing for orchestra. And of course, I mean that's and me understanding orchestra started perhaps younger than some people would expect. Like I said, with Barry White, I mean it's those nuances that, of course, I didn't think about it that much because I didn't have the mental capacity or musical knowledge to think about it. But it's just things that it starts building up. It starts, combining on themselves as I start approaching more and more, string heavy rep. And so it's doing that helped me feel really prepared and really comfortable with knowing that, okay, let's combine trumpets with low horns, because that's a very specific timbre that works it's so effective, because you have the brightness of the trumpet and the darkness of the horns. Especially when they're playing in the same register, it's a very like incomparable like effect that you can get, and stuff like that. Even combining oboe with second violin, of course, just the traditional standard doubling cello with basses, because it helps really fatten up the low end. It widens up the room, it fills the room more. And it's those kind of choices that that I play around with. I start with traditional unless something really comes to my head. It's like, oh, what if we? I think this would work very well as this. It would seem idiomatic. It would seem like they're not doing anything for the sake of it, and don't feel like they're. It doesn't feel like rewarding, which is not the point. But the point of orchestra is like you want to get the ideas on a score that makes sense to the players, that makes sense to the musicians, to their hands, to their bowing. That it would, and if they and it's a plus that when they enjoy it, then there's a little bit of oomph that they give into their own expression of it, right? And if you write something that they can enjoy playing, not necessarily easy stuff, but stuff that just feels natural. It feels like, oh, this was written for this instrument. It it helps it helps mentally with with the playback and the read back. So it's been a really fun experience working with Cambry on this project with with the orchestrations with the big low hit little brass hits in the 5/4 section. That's like and I immediately knew where I wanted to go because I mean he was going full Hans Zimmer with this and I was all for it. I was like, all right, yeah, let's do this. Having both bass trombone and tuba and the low pedal register, well, in octave, it's not the same register, but it's just that grittiness you hear that just adds so much depth and so no, and I'm glad I'm able and Cambry allow me to to experiment and to really practice with the extremes with making the most out of what is available with an orchestra because even sometimes where I surprise Cambry or even sometimes Cambry surprise me with with what he wants and then how I perceive that and how I choose to lay down my decisions and of course I would check back with Cambry and say, hey, what do you think of this? Is this right? Is this not? And again, there's plenty more communication that happens from that goes right up until the recording session.
Yeah, and I think it was a lot to be there was a lot to be learned on my end. Specifically with the recording session, there were some bumps in the road, but we got over them, and it was great. It was really great because I've always valued real world experience as much as I value theoretical experience. We spend time in classrooms talking about these things all day, but if you can't apply it to the real world when issues come up like that, it can be an issue to adapt to those situations. And now I think understanding the process a little better, has helped me personally to grow with my writing and ultimately recording scoring the picture. So yeah, it was awesome to have you on this project. I'm looking forward to having you on future projects too, and maybe vice versa. And yeah, so I mean you got your own stuff going for you. So we have a few minutes left. I wanted to kind of cover and see what's next for Joe Jaxson. What are you expecting to see your name in on billboards in New York, or like what are you going on tour, world tour of Joe Jaxson?
Oh yeah, man.
What's going on? What's going on with Joe Jaxson?
The one man composer tour, baby.
Yeah.
Coming to you. I don't know what would that entail, but it's something will happen from it. No, so yes, with current projects coming up, and some of you have already been seeing this in the past couple of days or whenever this interview comes out, that I've recently commissioned by the Allentown Symphony Orchestra, led by the wonderful Diane Witry, and there's actually even a small little outlet podcast on iHeart led by, I believe his name's Dan Holzman. Forgive me if I mess up that name, best memory. But they talk a little bit about how she found me and how she thinks she's going, like how wants to catch me as I'm rising in my career. And she's been hearing a lot from her colleagues and how I've been grateful enough to be commissioned for the finale of their upcoming season. And so April 13th and 14th, you will of course, what else is on that concert? That's they have Beethoven 9 to close out the season. They have Florence Price's Andante Cantabile, and of course Adolf Hailstork's Fanfare and Amazing Grace, plus a couple more other pieces. And where there's mine, it's a 6 to 8 full orchestral work. Title yet to be decided, but she wants it fast and lively, and I'll give her fast and lively. It's going to be a wonderful and manageable challenge with the amount of time that they'll probably have to rehearse it. And so I'm really excited for next year. So April 13th and 14th of 2024, not this coming one. No, can't have that. So it's very scary. And so that's one of my biggest upcoming projects. And what next I have is a consortium I started with my alma mater, with the orchestra director Foster Byers of James Madison. We wanted to work together. We knew we wanted to do something, but we didn't know what. And after conversation, we felt like a consortium was our best way forward, which has been very fruitful so far. We have 13 orchestras signed up for this consortium, and the pieces are already like well underway. Both pieces for Allentown and this are already well underway, and they're sounding well how I want them to be. And so I'm really excited to have these both being premiered in similar times around the country. And so there's that going for me. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There's something else having a feature, but I'm not going to mention it yet. It's not even hidden. It hasn't hit any papers or emails yet, so they're all just in my head, so it doesn't really count at all. But there's one more piece project that's not as grandeur, but just as interesting as the orchestra projects, where we have the sound sculpture event, where we have these sculptures that are built around campus, and composers are from UT are commissioned to write these short pieces with chamber groups. And so we have a rain date for April 20th at 6 p.m. I'll be writing, the piece will be for sax quartet plus track table percussion, and they're going to be doing some fun staging, some moving around, a little bit of aleatoric stuff, but encapsulating the sound world that I think a mass audience can enjoy.
Well, we're excited for all of it, Joe, and like again, it was a pleasure to have you on. Not just this interview, but to have you on the projects that we worked together on. To be able to go to school, it was interesting because Joe just came up to me and we instantly clicked about film music, and to see how that our relationship grew from that, it has been an awesome thing, and to I'm excited to work with Joe in the future as I go on my endeavors. I'm leaving UT, most of you know, but I cherish relationships like Joe that I've had the opportunity to know here. And so check out Joe's music on joejacksonmusic.com. Also check out Valiant. There's going to be links on Instagram, also on the YouTube for Diamond Night Studios. If you would like to check out Valiant, check out Joe's new symphony. Well, it'll be a year from now, but check it out when it comes out. Check it out. Yeah, it's gonna be a while. It's gonna be a while, but check it out when it comes out. Am I missing anything else, Joe?
I don't think I don't think I have much else to say. I just want to thank everyone that's tuning into this interview for taking the time out of your day to listen to us to just blabber about orchestration and film music. That it means a lot to us. And thank you for tuning in, and hope I can see all of you in some form of capacity and other future projects.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Well, I will catch you on the next edition, the final edition. Potentially, we're thinking about going into a season 2, but we'll that's TBD. So we'll see you on the final edition of, we'll just say for now, season 1 of Diamond Night Studios interview series. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.